So when we're talking about things about supporting fine motor development, occupational therapists are going to be looking at a couple of different things. First, we're going to look at hand strength and coordination. So quite literally, I guess, when we're talking about hand strength, it's the muscles in our hands and the muscles that support our hands to move them and coordinate them to do things like hold a pencil, tie our shoes, cut with scissors. We can't focus specifically just alone on the skills of our hands without also targeting things like upper body strength. You'll see in the next slide, there's a focus too about how our upper body strength, things like our shoulders, our back muscles, our core, our neck muscles, these are all supporting our ability to use our hands successfully. And then lastly, if we're working on fine motor skills, we're also going to be looking at posture, our position, the way we hold ourselves, the position and posture we find ourselves when completing these activities can support or inhibit our success with fine motor tasks. So we're going to be talking a little bit about those things today. This slide is one that I mentioned when we're talking about fine motor movements. You see here at the bottom, it's kind of a hierarchy of skill. So what we're going to be looking at is shoulder stability. Are our shoulders strong enough to be stable for us to isolate the movements of our elbow and our forearm being this, our elbow being this guy right here. And then wrist stability. So if everything is strong and stable in our shoulders and our forearms, then we can move our wrists. Finally, it gets us to fine motor skills. And these are the precise movements of our hands that allow us to do the things that are really necessary and important and functional. So to give you a quick capture of what we're looking at when we're looking at things like fine motor skills and development, there's different grasp patterns that are specific to age. So when we're younger, our grasp patterns should be a little bit more gross, where we use our whole hand or several fingers to complete activities. Whereas as we get older, we're completing more complex activities like holding a pencil. So maybe at 10 months of age, we're starting to isolate items between our fingers to work on pinch and our pincer grasp, but to work on pinching objects, picking up small things, picking up Cheerios to feed ourselves. As we get older, our expectations are, okay, now we're going to be using a tool or a writing utensil. So let's take a peek. So at 12 months of age, we're going to be holding the crayon or the pencil with our whole hand. It gets a little bit more advanced as we're looking at 2 to 3 years of age with a digital pronate grasp, where now we've rotated our hand, our wrist, and our forearm to color. We then use our whole hand at 3 and 4 years of age to hold the pencil. So this is when kiddos are stabilizing the pencil with their finger. Let me show you here with a pencil. They're stabilizing the pencils with their fingers, but they're moving the pencil with their shoulder. So these are bigger movements. These are when we're coloring big shapes and drawing lines and coloring, big areas on the paper. The idea here is at 3 and 4 years of age, we should be doing things a little bit larger. So when we start writing and forming letters at this age, our letters are much bigger because we're utilizing our shoulder muscles and other muscles of our arm while our fingers are getting used to holding this writing instrument. And then finally, at 5 and 6 years of age, we're using our fingers, where now we've stabilized the pencil, and now our fingers are moving side to side, front and back, in order for us to create more precise movements of the fingers to support things like writing letters, cursive writing, writing in smaller sections, filling out worksheets, things like that. Certainly grasp patterns, we're also talking about things that are different patterns, ways to pick up something with the handle, to throw a ball, to pinch a key, to turn it in the key in a doorknob. These are all patterns of fine motor development that OTs look at, and they're developmental. So it's important to know that if we're having challenges with these particular patterns, like holding a pencil, an OT might also look at some of these other grasp patterns because they set the foundation for our ability to be successful with our fine motor skills. It's also important to notate here too that when we're talking about things, especially when we're talking about handwriting, we have to consider handedness. The hand that we use, hand dominance, when is that established? I get this question a lot from parents and a lot of other clinicians as well. My child is alternating their hands. They're 3 years old, but they're using their left hand sometimes to color. They're using their right hand sometimes to feed themselves. What's going on here? It's important to know that hand dominance is developed between a pretty sizable window. So from 3 to 5 years of age is when we start establishing our hand dominance. So by 5 years of age, which is what this little one's holding the pencil right here, when we're writing more consistently, that's when we really should have established, for the most part, a well-established hand dominance. Right or left hand should be holding the pencil or the marker or the objects that we're manipulating. You should be using it with your left or right hand most of the time and not alternating as frequently. We know that a lot of our children, especially children on the autism spectrum and other developmental delays, have this particular challenge where they may not develop handedness until much later. So it's important for us as OTs to look at the grasp patterns and also which hand we're using. And then encouraging, if it's one hand that we should be using or more often, let's encourage that hand to be doing that so we can develop the fine motor and grasp patterns that are essential for that hand to be successful. So when we're targeting things like hand strength, that's one of the tenets when we're looking at things like fine motor skills. We're going to do activities that require strengthening of the muscles of our hands, the inside of our hands. So things like using therapy putty or Play-Doh, squeezing, stretching, twisting, pinching. These are all ways in which we develop the skills within our hands and create endurance to do some of these more precise activities. So you might see in occupational therapy, or some suggestions we might have for you is try some grip strength activities with either therapy, which is they're using here, things like Play-Doh or things that are resistive. You'll see here a lot of times these kinds of fidget toys, these balls with the nets over them. Those will create a lot of resistance. So when you squeeze, you're really putting a lot of tension on the inside muscles of the hand in order to contract those muscles, and when you squeeze them, make these really cool patterns. What we find, though, is that these particular balls, the grippy balls, are really resistive. They're actually really challenging for a lot of our younger kiddos, 3, 4, 5 years of age. So I might recommend something that's a little less resistive and a little bit easier to squeeze. You're still targeting those muscles, but instead of having to, really use 2 hands or ask mom, I can't do this anymore, or have someone else do it, try something that's a little less resistive. Things like the little balls that have maybe the water balls in them, or there's these little squishy guys where you squeeze their head and eyes bug out. It's really motivating, it's really fun, and it gets kids engaged to activate those muscles that they may not otherwise be utilizing. When we're talking about hand fine motor skills, we're also talking about hand coordination exercises, things that require our hands to do something more precise than turning muscles on to squeeze, or turning them off, or extending your muscles to do some of the other exercises that we might have been talking about in the last slide. This slide is in-hand manipulation activities. So things like using tweezers. We're going to take long-handled tweezers a lot of times and pick up small items. So we're going to utilize maybe these 3 fingers, which are really important and necessary when we graduate to skills such as holding a pencil. So we're going to use maybe tweezers to work on coordinating these muscles to pick up an object and put it into something. For our younger kiddos, we might do things like marble races, or marble towers, where they have to drop marbles into a tower or put things together. So it's not just working on strength, but also how do I coordinate the muscles of my hands to do more precise things? Things like these coin activities are really fantastic for our little guys to practice this lateral pinch. For our older kiddos, maybe we'll use Connect 4. So instead of this lateral pinch to put in the coins, we're now going to use our more precise pincer grasp to pick up the coins and put them in the Connect 4. Things like beading activities are a great way to practice in-hand manipulation and coordination type things. When we're doing tweezers activities, this is a really common exercise that we might give kiddos a lot of times. And a lot of parents have questions as to when is the right time for my child to start doing exercises like this. And usually age 2 seems pretty young, and it is, to start these things. But we can use for age 2, we might, instead of using these really precise handles, we might use things like tongs, where you use them in the kitchen. So instead of using instead of using these precise things, maybe we're going to pick up small cotton balls and pick them up and put some things, or pick up small stuffed animals with our tongs and use our whole hand to open and close. And as we get older, after age 2, 3, 4, 5 years of age, then we can graduate to something like these tweezer activities. They're really phenomenal for helping set your child up for holding the pencil or feeding utensils or things like that, but not just targeting that skill. It's working on developing the coordination of the hand and the fingers in order to pick things up and manipulate them appropriately. Sometimes for some of our kiddos, I'll also do things like finger aerobics, where we're going to do activities where all of our fingers need to touch, or we're going to pretend that we're a bird and we have to hook our thumbs and then utilize our fingers in such a way that it looks like we're a bird. Lots of really great ways to work on hand coordination and ways in which to even warm up our muscles before we're supposed to be doing things like homework or schoolwork, in this case, at home. We talked a little bit about how our upper body strength will also support our fine motor skills. So, maybe for adults, we might do activities like push-ups, or in this instance, we might have an adaptive push-up where someone is utilizing their weight bearing through their hands, pushing down and up. For some of our kiddos, we need to come up with something that's a little bit more motivating. So even though this is a great activity for some of our kids that can tolerate that, maybe our 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds that can do this type of thing, we might need to use an activity more like this. So we're modifying this activity to allow for the child, they're still weight bearing through their hands over a ball. So that's giving them some support if it's really hard to maintain this position without it. And then instead of reaching down and pushing back up like you would in a traditional push up, this child is putting together a puzzle. So they have to reach for the puzzle piece, shift their weight, maintain this strong posture and position. And it's a fantastic way to target these muscles and work on the upper body strength while also playing a functional fun game. Some other fun upper body strengthening activities can be things like crab walking or donkey kicks or bear walking. I love to do these types of activities with a lot of my clients where we might roll a dice and the dice has different animal walks on them and it lands on crab walking. So now we've got a crab walk around a target, or maybe we'll play like crab walk soccer where we all get in this position and then we stabilize the ball on our tummies and then and then crab walk all the way to put the soccer ball into the net. These are great ways to allow your child opportunities to weight bear, build these muscles, but in fun avenues, and also address things like endurance. Crab walking, donkey kicking, bear walking, this can be tricky for a lot of kiddos. So maybe if they're not quite yet able to do this independently, we might do something like a wheelbarrow walk. So it's a similar activity. We're weight bearing through our hands. We're building up muscles in our shoulders, our neck, our trunk. And then by giving a little bit of postural support, this person right here is holding at the tummy. You can hold your child at the feet to help them walk. And then that way they're shifting their weight, they're building up their strength in their shoulders, which is ultimately going to support fine motor skills. So a lot of times I'll have parents come to me and say, I really want my child to hold their pencil. They have a really bad grasp at school. The teacher is describing that they're having a hard time keeping up with handwriting activities. And I might give some strategies or suggestions to do these types of skills. What we want to do is build these muscles in addition to the muscles and the coordination of our hand. Some other things too is things like planks, where we could do like maybe a modified plank where our focus is we're going to be working on not just the weight bearing through the shoulders and the forearms, but we're also weight bearing. We're also activating our postural muscles, our tummy muscles to contract to build core strength, which is another tenet of building your fine motor skills.